The transport ship landed on Kara 7 with a loud thud. Sand flew everywhere as the engines shut down. Jin-Ho Kim grabbed his tool bag and looked out the window. The planet was nothing but red sand and rocks as far as he could see. The sun was bright and hot, even through the ship's thick glass. "Welcome to paradise," said Taman Park, the human team leader. He wiped sweat from his face, even though they were still inside the cool ship. "Remember, we have 3 weeks to set up the research. Base, the supply ship won't come back for 6 months. Jin-Ho nodded and checked his tools one more time. He was the only human engineer on this mixed team. The others were all aliens from different planets. They had been polite during the long trip here, but Jin-Ho could tell they thought humans were not very smart. The ship's door opened and hot air rushed in. Jin-Ho felt like he was opening an oven. Captain Veltar was the first one out. He was tall and blue with 4 arms. His people, the Zalonians, were known for their strong military and fancy technology. "This heat is nothing," Veltar said, his voice deep and proud. "On my homeworld we have storms that would melt your human skin, but our technology keeps us safe from anything." Dr. Kethin came out next. He looked like a giant bug with 6 legs and big black eyes. His people, the Brinthari, thought they were the smartest race in the galaxy. They built computers that could think faster than any living being. "The atmospheric conditions are exactly as predicted," Dr. Kethin said, looking at a small device in his hands. "Temperature, wind speed, humidity, all within normal ranges. This planet is very simple to understand." Engineer Kixtel was the last alien to leave the ship. He was short and round with gray skin and no hair. The Morvac people were famous for building machines that could float in the air without touching the ground. "Look at all this empty space," Kixtel said, rubbing his hands together. "Perfect for testing my new floating habitat design. The humans will be very impressed." Jin-Ho just listened and said nothing. He had studied this planet for months before coming here. The official report said Karis 7 was a safe, boring desert world. But Jin-Ho had read some old files that worried him. There were stories about sudden storms that came from nowhere. Stories about research teams that had to leave quickly. But when he tried to talk about these things during the trip, the aliens just laughed. "Humans worry too much," Captain Veltar had said. "That is why you will never be great explorers like us." Now they were here, and Jin-Ho could feel something in the air. It was too quiet. On Earth, deserts had sounds, wind, insects, birds, but this place was silent, except for their voices. The team walked about a kilometer from the landing site to find a good place for their base. Captain Veltar pointed to a flat area between some small hills. "This spot is perfect," he said. "Good drainage, solid ground, protected from wind. My sensors say the soil can hold heavy buildings." Everyone agreed and started unpacking their equipment. Jin-Ho watched as the aliens began setting up their shelters. Captain Veltar's people brought out boxes that looked like metal blocks. When he pressed a button, the blocks unfolded into a large building with smooth walls and a flat roof. "Atmospheric processors," Veltar explained, pointing to some spinning machines on the roof. "They control the air inside, temperature, humidity, even the smell, all perfect. Force field generators protect the whole building. Nothing can get through, not wind, not sand, not even a bomb." Dr. Kethin was building something that looked like a glass bubble. It was completely see-through and seemed to float just above the ground. "Energy shields," Dr. Kethin said, noticing Jin-Ho watching. "Much better than solid walls. The computer calculates the perfect defense against any threat. Wind? The shield becomes curved to deflect it. Heat? The shield reflects the sun's rays. This is what real science looks like." Engineer Kixtel was assembling several small pods that floated in the air like balloons. They were connected by bridges that also floated without support. "Gravity manipulation," Kixtel said proudly. "No need to touch the dirty ground. Climate control, entertainment systems, automatic food makers, everything a civilized being needs. The pods can even move to a new location if needed." Jin-Ho looked at all these impressive buildings, then walked to a different spot about 50 meters away. He knelt down and picked up some sand, letting it run through his fingers. Then he took out a simple tool and started digging. "What are You doing, Jinho? Taemin asked. Building our shelter, Jinho replied, still digging. The aliens stopped their work to watch. Jinho was making a circular hole in the ground about 10 meters wide. It was not very deep, maybe half a meter. Captain Veltar laughed. Are you making a swimming pool? This is a desert, human. There is no water here. Jinho did not answer. He kept digging, making the hole perfectly round. Then he walked around the area, picking up rocks. Not just any rocks. He tested each one, tapping it with a small hammer and listening to the sound it made. The human is collecting rocks, Dr. Kethen said to the others. Perhaps this is some kind of primitive ritual. Many low-level species have strange ceremonies when they arrive at new places. Engineer Kixtel shook his head. Look at him testing. Those stones one by one. So slow, so inefficient. My floating pods were built in 20 minutes. His hole will take all day. But Jinho kept working. He found some clay-like soil near a small ridge and mixed it with water from his supplies. Then, he started making blocks by pressing the mixture into a small frame and letting them dry in the hot sun. Sand blocks? Captain Veltar said, now sounding annoyed. What is this, the Stone Age? We are here to do science, not play with mud. Taemin walked over to Jinho. Maybe you should use one of the standard prefab shelters from the ship. They are fast to set up and have good environmental controls. Jinho looked up from his work. Those shelters are designed for Earth normal conditions. This planet might be different. Different how? Dr. Kethen asked, his big eyes staring at Jinho. My computers have analyzed every aspect of this world. The weather patterns are completely predictable. No major storms, no dangerous animals, no toxic gases. It is one of the safest planets we have ever visited. Jinho pointed to some strange marks in the sand near their camp. What made these patterns? Dr. Kethen looked at the marks with his instruments. Simple erosion from normal, wind, nothing unusual. And why is it so quiet? Jinho asked. Most desert worlds have some kind of life even if we cannot see it, but this place has no sounds at all. Because it is a dead world, Captain Veltar said. No life, no problems. That is why we chose it for our research. Jinho went back to his work. He laid the first row of sand blocks around the edge of his circular hole, then started on the second row. Each block was placed carefully with the joints overlapping like bricks in an old Earth building. This is embarrassing, Engineer Kixtel said to the others, but loud enough for Jinho to hear. The other races will think humans are still living, in caves. How can we work with people who use such primitive methods? Maybe we should report this, Dr. Kethen suggested. The Galactic Council should know that humans are not ready for advanced exploration missions. Captain Veltar nodded. On my world, we stopped building with stone 10,000 years ago. Even our ancestors would laugh at this. Jinho heard everything but said nothing. He had been called primitive before. Human technology was newer than most alien races. But humans had learned to survive on many different worlds, often in places where fancy machines could not work. As the day went on, the alien shelters took shape quickly. Captain Veltar's building was finished and running perfectly. Cool air came from the vents and the force field shimmered around the walls. Dr. Kethen's bubble was complete, with holographic displays showing data from sensors all around the camp. Engineer Kixtel's floating pods were connected and spinning, slowly in the air like a small city in the sky. Jinho was still placing sand blocks one by one. His shelter looked like the bottom part of an igloo made from red-brown stone. It was not impressive, but Jinho seemed happy with his work. Are you planning to finish that before we leave this planet? Captain Veltar asked. Jinho smiled. Should be done tomorrow. Then I need to test it. Test it? Dr. Kethen asked. Test it for what? To make sure it works, Jinho replied. Engineer Kixtel laughed so hard his whole body shook. Works for what? Keeping out the rain? This is a desert, or maybe you are worried about earthquakes that do not exist. Jinho just kept working as the sun went down. The aliens went into their comfortable shelters with perfect lighting and climate control. Jinho set up a simple tent next to his unfinished shelter and ate a basic meal from a ration pack. Taemin stayed with him. Jinho, I have to ask, why are you doing this? The prefab shelters work fine. The alien designs look much better. Jinho looked up at the stars. They were brighter here than on Earth because the air was so clear. Sometimes the best solution is not the most impressive one, he said. Sometimes you need to build for what might happen, not just what you expect. But the computers say nothing will happen here. Jinho nodded. Computers are usually right, but usually is not always. As they went to sleep, the sound of alien machines hummed across the camp. Air processors, force field generators, gravity manipulators. All working perfectly in the quiet desert night. Jinho woke up before sunrise, just like he did every day. The desert was still dark and quiet, but something felt different. The air was too still. Even the gentle breeze from yesterday had stopped completely. He crawled out of his tent and looked around the camp. The alien shelters glowed softly in the darkness. Captain Veltar's building hummed with the sound of air processors. Dr. Kethen's bubble showed dancing lights from computer displays. Engineer Kixtel's floating pods turned, slowly like a mobile above a baby's bed. Jinho walked to his shelter and started working again. He had to finish the dome today. As he placed more sand blocks, he noticed something strange. The blocks he had made yesterday felt different. They were harder, stronger than when he first made them. The desert heat was baking them like pottery, in a kiln. Good morning, Jinho. Sujin Lee walked over carrying a cup of coffee. She was young, maybe 25, and this was her first mission to another planet. She was supposed to study rocks and soil, but she spent most of her time watching Jinho work. Morning, Sujin. You are up early. Could not sleep. Something about this place feels weird. Too quiet, you know? Sujin sat on a rock and sipped her coffee. The others think I am just nervous because it is my first off-world mission. Jinho nodded and kept working. What do your rock samples tell you about this place? Sujin pulled out a small device and showed him some numbers. That is the strange part. The soil composition keeps changing. Yesterday morning, the iron content was 3%. Yesterday evening, it was 5%. This morning, it is 7%. What could cause that? I do not know. Maybe underground water moving minerals around. But there is no water here. Maybe electromagnetic fields. But Dr. Kethen says the electromagnetic readings are normal. Jinho stopped working and looked at her device more carefully. Show me the electromagnetic data from the last 2 days. Sujin touched the screen a few times. Here. See? Steady readings, no big changes. Dr. Kethen says this proves the planet is completely stable. But Jinho saw something different in the numbers. They were steady, but they were slowly getting stronger. Not by much, less than 2% over 2 days. Most people would call that normal variation. But Jinho had seen patterns like this before. Sujin, can you check the readings from orbit? From before we landed? Sure. Sujin worked on her device for a few minutes. Here are the readings from our ship when we were still in space 3 days ago. Jinho compared the numbers. The electromagnetic field was definitely getting stronger. Not fast, but steady, like water slowly filling a bathtub. What does it mean? Sujin asked. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. Jinho went back to placing blocks. Can you do me a favor? Keep checking those numbers every hour, and watch for any changes in the soil. You think something is going to happen? I think we should pay attention. As the morning went on, the other team members started their daily work. Captain Veltar was testing communication equipment. Dr. Kethen was setting up scientific instruments. Engineer Kixtel was making small improvements to his floating pods. Jinho finished the walls of his dome and started working on the roof. This was the hardest part. He had to make each block curve slightly so the dome would be smooth and strong. Sujin helped him, holding blocks in place while the clay mortar dried. This is taking forever, she said. Why not use quick-setting foam like the others? Because foam might not work if conditions change, Jinho replied. These blocks will get stronger over time, not weaker. Captain Veltar walked over to watch them work. Still building your cave, human? My shelter was finished yesterday and is already running full scientific analysis. We have collected more data in one day than you will collect in a week. Good, Jinho said. What does your data say about the electromagnetic readings? Captain, Veltar looked at a device on his belt. Normal and stable, why do you ask? Just curious. Humans are always curious about the wrong things, Captain Veltar said. You worry about electromagnetic fields that change by 1%, but you do not see the importance of our real work here. Dr. Keithan joined them. I heard you asking about electromagnetic readings. Are you concerned about something? Jinho kept working on his dome. The readings are getting stronger slowly but steadily. Yes, I noticed that too, Dr. Keithan said. It is a normal fluctuation caused by the planet's rotation. As we move through space, we encounter different magnetic fields from the sun and other planets. Nothing dangerous. Have you seen this pattern before on other worlds? Dr. Keithan's big eyes blinked several times. I have seen thousands of worlds, human. This planet is showing completely normal behavior. My computers have compared it to over 900 similar worlds. The probability of dangerous weather in the next month is less than 0.3%. Engineer Kixtel floated down from his pods on a small platform. What are you all discussing? More human worries? Jinho is concerned about electromagnetic fluctuations, Captain Veltar explained. Ah yes, I use electromagnetic fields to power my floating systems. I have been monitoring them very carefully. They are perfect for my needs, steady, predictable, and getting slightly stronger each day. This gives my pods more power to float higher and carry more weight. See? Dr. Keithan said to Jinho. Even Engineer Kixtel benefits from these changes. They are helpful, not dangerous. Jinho finished placing another curved block. What about the wind patterns? What wind patterns? Captain Veltar asked. There is no wind. Has not been any wind since we landed. That is what worries me. The aliens looked at each other. Dr. Keithan made a sound like a sigh. Human on most desert worlds there is very little wind. The lack of plant life means no daily temperature changes to create air movement. No wind is normal for a place like this. On Earth deserts there is always some wind. This is not Earth, Engineer Kixtel said. Different planets work differently. You cannot expect alien worlds to behave like your home planet. Jinho nodded but kept working. At lunchtime, Sujin came back with new readings. The electromagnetic field is now 9% stronger than when we landed, she whispered to Jinho. And I found something else. The soil samples from this morning have twice as much iron as yesterday. Where is the iron coming from? I do not know. It is like something underground is moving toward the surface. Jinho looked around the camp. Everything seemed normal. The aliens were eating lunch and discussing their work. The sun was bright and hot. The red sand stretched to the horizon without moving, but Jinho had learned to trust his instincts. Something was building up underground. Something was changing the electromagnetic field. Something was making the air completely still. After lunch, he worked faster on his dome. Sujin helped him, and they managed to finish the roof before evening. The shelter looked like a smooth hill made of red stone. It had one small door and two small windows. Inside it was cool and dark. Now what? Sujin asked. Now we test it. Jinho had brought some equipment from the ship. He set up sensors inside and outside the dome to measure temperature, humidity, air pressure, and electromagnetic fields. Then he sealed all the gaps around the door and windows with a clay mixture. What are you testing for? Sujin asked. Everything. Heat, cold, wind, rain, electromagnetic interference. I want to know how this shelter behaves under different conditions. But there is no weather here to test against. Jinho looked at the sunset. The sky was perfectly clear with no clouds anywhere. Weather can change quickly on alien worlds. That evening, the team gathered for dinner outside Captain Veltar's shelter. The aliens were excited about their first day of real work. The soil composition is very interesting, Dr. Keithan said. Much more complex than our orbital scans indicated. I am finding trace metals that should not exist on a world like this. My communication equipment is working perfectly, Captain Veltar added. The electromagnetic conditions are ideal for long-range transmissions. We should have no trouble staying in contact with the orbiting supply ship. Engineer Kixtel was playing with a small floating device that moved through the air like a fish, swimming in water. The gravity manipulation systems are performing beyond specifications. I think the unique electromagnetic properties of this world are enhancing their efficiency. Taemin looked at Jin-Ho. What about your shelter? Is it ready? The structure is finished. Now I am monitoring how it responds to environmental changes. What environmental changes? Captain Veltar asked. The weather has been exactly the same since we landed. Hot, dry, and still. That is the problem, Jin-Ho said. Weather that stays exactly the same for too long usually means something is building up. Dr. Kethen made his sighing sound again. Human, you are looking for problems that do not exist. This world has been stable for millions of years. Our orbital surveys show no history of major storms or climate changes. What about short-term events, things that happen quickly and end quickly? Like what? Dust storms, electromagnetic pulses, temperature changes. Engineer Kixtel laughed. You sound like you are expecting a war, not a research mission. This is a peaceful, empty world with no dangers at all. Jin-Ho ate his dinner and said nothing more. But after the others went to their shelters, he stayed outside with Su-Jin, checking his instruments. The electromagnetic field is now 12% stronger than when we landed. Jin-Ho woke up at 4 a.m. to the sound of his instruments beeping. Something was wrong. He crawled out of his tent and looked at the display. The electromagnetic readings had jumped 20% in just 6 hours. The air pressure was dropping fast. Su-Jin was already awake, sitting by her equipment with a worried look on her face. Jin-Ho, you need to see this. The iron content in the soil has doubled again overnight. And there is something else. My seismic sensors are picking up vibrations deep underground. Jin-Ho knelt next to her equipment and listened through the headphones. Far below them, he could hear a low rumbling sound, like a giant machine starting up. How deep is it coming? From? At least 2 kilometers down, maybe deeper. It sounds like something is moving up toward the surface. Jin-Ho looked around the camp. The alien shelters were quiet and peaceful. Their occupants were still sleeping, confident in their perfect technology and safe predictions. Su-Jin, I need you to help me with something, but do not tell the others. Yet. What is it? I want to move some supplies into my shelter. Food, water, medical equipment. Just in case. Su-Jin looked at the clear sky above them. Not a single cloud anywhere. You really think something is going to happen? I think we should be ready. They spent the next 2 hours quietly moving supplies, from the main storage area to Jin-Ho's dome. Basic food that did not need cooking, water containers, first aid supplies, emergency communication equipment that worked without power from the main systems. As the sun came up, the other team members started waking up. Captain Veltar was the first to notice something unusual. Why is my atmospheric processor working harder than normal? He asked, looking at his control display. The air outside has not changed, but the system is using more power. Dr. Kethen checked his instruments. I am seeing some unusual readings, too. The electromagnetic field strength has increased significantly overnight. Engineer Kixtel came down from his floating pods looking confused. My gravity manipulators are acting strange. They have too much power suddenly. I had to reduce the settings to keep the pods from floating too high. Jin-Ho walked over to them. How much has the electromagnetic field increased? Dr. Kethen looked at his data. About 30% since yesterday. But this is still within acceptable ranges. My computers show no danger. What about the air? Pressure? Captain Veltar checked his readings. It has dropped 12%. That is unusual but not dangerous. Probably just normal weather variation. Jin-Ho pointed to the horizon. Look at the sky. Everyone turned to look. The sky was still clear and blue, but there was something different about it. The air seemed thicker somehow, like looking through water instead of glass. I do not see anything unusual, Dr. Kethen said. Look at the horizon. See how the air is shimmering? Captain Veltar squinted his 4 eyes. That is just heat distortion, normal for a desert morning. But Jinho knew it was not heat distortion. He had seen this before on other worlds. The electromagnetic field was getting so strong that it was bending light. I recommend we all stay close to our shelters today, Jinho said. Just in case. Engineer Kixtail laughed. In case of what? Another beautiful, boring day in paradise? Jinho did not argue. He went back to his dome and started making final preparations. He sealed the air vents with covers that could be opened from inside. He checked the drainage system around the foundation. He tested the emergency lighting that ran on hand crank power. Su Jin helped him organize the supplies they had moved. The others think you are crazy, you know. Maybe I am. But if I am wrong, we just wasted a morning moving boxes. If I am right. He did not finish the sentence. They both knew what he meant. At noon, Tae-min came to check on them. Jinho, what are you doing in there? The others are starting to ask questions. Just running some tests on the shelter systems. What kind of tests? Jinho showed him the instrument readings. The electromagnetic field was now 50% stronger than when they landed. The air pressure had dropped 20%. The seismic sensors were picking up stronger vibrations from underground. Tae-min looked at the numbers but did not understand what they meant. Should I be worried about this? I do not know yet. But I think we should be prepared for the possibility that the weather might change. Change how? Before Jinho could answer, a new sound reached them from outside. It was very faint at first, like wind blowing through trees. But there were no trees on this planet, and there had been no wind for 3 days. They stepped outside and listened. The sound was coming from the south, beyond the hills where they had landed. Captain Veltar came out of his shelter, looking annoyed. What is that noise? It is interfering with my communication equipment. Dr. Keithan emerged from his bubble, checking his instruments frantically. This is impossible. My sensors show no wind anywhere within 100 kilometers. Engineer Kixtel floated down from his pods. Something is wrong with the electromagnetic field. My floating systems are becoming unstable. The sound was getting louder. It no longer sounded like wind. It sounded like a freight train approaching from far away. Jinho looked at the southern horizon and saw something that made his heart race. A thin line of brown was visible where the sky met the ground. Everyone get to shelter now. What are you talking about? Captain Veltar demanded. The sky is clear. My sensors show. His words were cut off as all the electronic equipment in the camp started making warning sounds. Computers beeped, sensors buzzed, communication radios crackled with static. Dr. Kethan stared at his instruments in shock. The electromagnetic field just doubled in 30 seconds. That is impossible. The brown line on the horizon was getting bigger. What had looked like a pencil line was now as thick as a rope, and it was moving toward them fast. Sandstorm, Jinho said, "Everyone into my shelter, now." "Do not be ridiculous," Captain Veltar said. "My force field generators can handle any storm. My atmospheric processors can filter any amount of sand." But as he spoke, his force field started flickering. The smooth energy barrier around his building turned choppy and unstable. Engineer Kixtel's floating pods began spinning out of control. One of them dropped suddenly, hitting the ground with a crash. "My gravity systems are failing," he shouted. "The electromagnetic interference is too strong." Dr. Kethan's bubble shelter started flashing warning lights. "Computer systems are shutting down. Backup power is not working. This cannot be happening." The brown line on the horizon was now a wall of sand and dust 50 meters high, stretching from east to west as far as they could see. The sound was no longer like a train. It was like 100 trains all roaring at once. Lightning flashed inside the storm. Not normal lightning that went from cloud to ground, but horizontal bolts that jumped back and forth through the sand, like angry snakes. "Electromagnetic storm," Jinho shouted over the growing noise. "The sand is charged with electricity. It will destroy any electronic equipment it touches." Captain Veltar's force field collapsed completely. His atmospheric processors stopped working and started sparking. "This is not possible. My equipment is military grade. It is designed to work in any environment. Engineer Kixtel's remaining pods crashed to the ground one by one. My floating systems are completely dead. How can sand destroy gravity manipulation? Technology? Dr. Kethen's bubble shelter lost power and started deflating like a punctured balloon. All my computers are failing. The electromagnetic pulse is too strong. The wall of sand was now only 2 kilometers away and moving fast. The wind hit them first, not the gentle breeze they had been missing, but hurricane-force gusts that knocked them off their feet. "Into the dome!" Jinho yelled. "Everyone inside now!" Su-Jin was already running toward Jinho's shelter. Taemin followed her, but the aliens hesitated, still believing their technology would save them. "My shelter can be repaired." Captain Veltar shouted, "I just need to restart the generators." A blast of wind filled with sand hit him like a solid wall. He staggered backward, his blue skin already turning gray from the dust coating him. Engineer Kixtel tried to climb back into one of his crashed pods, but the door would not open. The electronic locks had died with everything else. Dr. Keithan was pressing buttons on his instruments, but the screens were all black. "This cannot be happening. My calculations showed no possibility of storms." The wall of sand was now 500 meters away. They could see individual rocks and debris spinning through the air inside it. The lightning was constant, jumping from grain to grain in brilliant purple flashes. "Last chance," Jinho yelled. "Get in the dome or you will die out here." "Captain," Veltar looked at his dead shelter, then at Jinho's simple stone dome. For the first time since landing on Keras 7, the proud alien warrior looked scared. Engineer Kixtel abandoned his floating pods and ran toward the dome. Dr. Kethan dropped his dead instruments and followed. Captain Veltar was the last to move. He looked one more time at his high-tech shelter, now dark and silent, then ran for Jinho's primitive-looking refuge. They all squeezed through the small door just as the storm hit the camp. The first blast of sand-filled wind struck Jinho's dome like a giant fist, but the curved walls deflected the force, sending the wind around and over the structure instead of against it. Inside the dome, they could hear the storm raging outside. It sounded like the world was ending. The storm had been raging for 6 hours. Inside Jinho's dome, 12 people sat in the dim light of hand-crank lanterns, listening to the fury outside. Sand hammered against the walls like machine gun fire. Lightning cracked and buzzed every few seconds, so close they could feel the static electricity in their hair. Captain Veltar sat with his back against the wall, staring at nothing. His military-grade shelter was gone. Through the small window, they had watched it collapse in the first hour of the storm. The force field generators had exploded in showers of sparks before the building itself was torn apart by the wind. "I do not understand," he said for the 10th time. "My equipment was tested in the worst conditions in the galaxy. Hurricane winds, electromagnetic warfare, plasma bombardments. How could sand destroy it?" Dr. Kethan was examining one of his instruments that had died before they reached the shelter. The electromagnetic pulse was beyond anything in our databases. It created feedback loops in the quantum processors. Every advanced system failed at once. Engineer Kixtel held his head in his hands. 20 years of work, 20 years designing, those floating pods, all gone in 20 minutes. Su-Jin checked the air quality with a simple chemical test kit. "At least we can breathe in here. The air outside is full of charged particles that would burn our lungs." Taemin looked around the dome with new eyes. What had seemed like a primitive cave yesterday now looked like the most advanced shelter he had ever seen. "Jinho, how did you know to build it this way?" Jinho was checking the water recycling system he had built into the floor. "I studied the old reports from this planet. Not the official ones, the emergency evacuation reports that were classified. 3 research teams had to leave this world suddenly because of storms like this. But the orbital survey showed no dangerous weather," Dr. Kethan protested. "The storms come from underground. This planet has a liquid metal core that moves in complex patterns. Every few weeks it creates a massive electromagnetic pulse that reaches the surface. The pulse charges every grain of sand in hundreds of square kilometers. Why did our sensors not detect this?" Jinho pointed to the thick stone walls around them. Because most sensors rely on electromagnetic fields to work. When the pulse starts building up, it interferes with electronic equipment. Your instruments could not see what was destroying them. Captain Veltar looked at the walls again. These stones, they do not conduct electricity. That is right. I tested every rock before using it. No metal content, no conductivity. The clay mortar is made from local materials that naturally resist electromagnetic interference. Engineer Kixtel raised his head. The shape too. The dome deflects wind, instead of fighting it. And the foundation goes deep underground below the charged sand layer. The whole structure is designed to work with natural forces instead of trying to overpower them. Dongwook Choi, the human medic, was treating cuts on Dr. Kethen's arms where flying debris had hit him during their run to the shelter. Jinho spent months studying this planet before we came here. He read every report, analyzed every soil sample, studied every weather pattern from similar worlds. But the official analysis said this world was safe, Captain Veltar said. The official analysis was based on short-term observations and computer models, Jinho replied. Computers are very good at predicting normal behavior. But this storm is not normal behavior. It is rare behavior. Sujin was monitoring the seismic sensors. The underground activity has increased. Whatever is causing these electromagnetic pulses is getting more active. How long will the storm last? Engineer Kixtel asked. Jinho checked his manual weather instruments. The old report said anywhere from 2 to 5 days. This one feels like it will be on the longer side. 5 days? Captain Veltar stood up suddenly. We cannot stay in here for 5 days. What about food? Water? Air? Jinho smiled for the first time since the storm began. Let me show you something. He led them to a section of the dome they had not noticed before. Built into the wall was a series of stone shelves and compartments. Some held food supplies. Others contained water filtration equipment made from simple materials that did not need electricity. Manual air filtration system, Jinho explained, pointing to a series of cloth and charcoal filters. It removes sand and toxic particles without using any power, just air pressure differences created by the storm itself. There was a hand crank water pump connected to an underground spring Jinho had found while digging the foundation. A simple waste disposal system that used gravity and natural bacteria to break down organic matter. Even a basic kitchen area with a small fire pit that vented safely to the outside. This is not a shelter, Dr. Kethen said, understanding dawning in his large eyes. This is a complete survival habitat. It is designed to keep 12 people alive for up to 2 weeks, without any outside power or supplies. Captain Veltar walked around the dome, looking at each system. Everything was simple but cleverly designed. The water system used physics principles that were thousands of years old, but it worked perfectly. The food storage used temperature differences in the stone walls to keep things cool. The ventilation system used the storm's own power to clean the air. On my world, we would call this engineering primitive, Captain Veltar said slowly. But it is not primitive, is it? It is sophisticated in a different way. Engineer Kixtel was examining the hand-crank power system that ran the lights and instruments. My floating pods had quantum processors that could calculate 1,000,000 variables per second, but they could not handle one variable they were not programmed for. This system has no computer at all, but it adapts automatically to changing conditions. Human engineering philosophy, Dongwook explained. We design for things to work even when they break. We call it graceful degradation. Your floating pods worked perfectly until they stopped working completely, Jinho added. This shelter will keep working even if half of it breaks down. Sujin was looking at the food supplies. Jinho, this is enough food for 20 people. Not 12. I wanted extra, just in case. In case of what? Before Jinho could answer, they heard a new sound outside. Not the constant roar of wind and sand, but voices. Human voices, shouting for help. Jinho looked through the small window. Through the blowing sand, he could see figures stumbling toward the dome. People in environmental suits fighting their way through the storm. The crew from the supply ship, Taemin said. They must have landed when the storm hit. Jinho opened the door carefully, creating just enough space for the newcomers to squeeze through. 3 people in damaged environmental suits fell through the opening, gasping and exhausted. "Thank God," one of them said, pulling off his helmet. It was Captain Park, the supply ship pilot. "We saw your beacon and thought we were hallucinating. How is anything still standing in this storm?" "Human engineering," Captain Veltar said quietly. Captain Park looked around the dome in amazement. "This place is like a fortress. Our ship was destroyed on landing. The electromagnetic pulse fried every system we had. We have been walking for 8 hours looking for shelter." Jinho helped the newcomers get settled and gave them water and food. Now there were 15 people in the shelter, but it still felt spacious. The design allowed for good air circulation even with more occupants than planned. "The storm is getting worse out there," one of the supply crew said. "We saw lightning strikes that were melting sand into glass. And the wind, I have never felt anything like it." "How long until the next supply ship arrives?" Taman asked Captain Park. 4 months, and that is assuming they can find us. The electromagnetic interference is blocking all communication signals. The reality hit everyone at once. They were stranded on Keras 7 for at least 4 months. No communication with the outside galaxy. No advanced technology to help them survive. Just Jinho's simple stone shelter and the supplies they could salvage. "We will not make it," Engineer Kixtel said. 15 people for 4 months? "We do not have enough food or water." Jinho was already making calculations in his head. "Actually, we do. This shelter can support 20 people for 2 months or 15 people for almost 3 months. And I know how to find more water and food on this planet." "How?" "The same way humans have survived on hostile worlds for thousands of years. We adapt." Dr. Kethen looked at his dead instruments, then at Jinho's simple but functional equipment. "You are saying we survive like primitives?" "I am saying we survive like humans." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the stone dome, 15 people from different worlds were learning a new way to think about technology and survival. They were learning that sometimes the most advanced solution was also the simplest one, and they were learning why, when everything else failed, human engineering still worked. The storm would end eventually, but the lessons they learned in Jinho's shelter would last much longer than that. On the 4th day, the storm finally began to die down. The constant hammering of sand against the dome walls became lighter. The lightning flashes came less often. The roaring wind dropped to a steady howl, then to a whistle, then to silence. Jinho was the first to look outside. He opened the small window cover and peered through the thick glass. What he saw made everyone else crowd around to look. The landscape had completely changed. Where Captain Veltar's military shelter had stood, there was now just a pile of twisted metal buried under 3 meters of sand. Dr. Kethen's bubble habitat was gone completely. Not even debris remained. Engineer Kixtel's floating pods were scattered across the desert like broken toys, half melted by lightning strikes. "My entire life's work," Engineer Kixtel whispered. "Gone." But Jinho's dome stood exactly as it had been built. The sand had piled up around it, but the structure itself was undamaged. The curved walls had shed the wind so effectively that there was actually less sand on the lee side than before the storm. "It is not just still standing," Sujin said in amazement. "It looks like it was never touched by the storm at all." Jinho opened the door carefully and stepped outside. The air was clear but strange. It smelled like metal and ozone from all the electrical activity. The ground was covered with a layer of glass where the lightning had melted the sand. One by one, the others followed him out. They stood in a circle, around the dome, looking at the destruction everywhere except where they were standing. Captain Veltar walked to where his shelter had been. He knelt in the sand and pulled out a piece of metal that had once been part of his atmospheric processor. It was twisted and scorched beyond recognition. "I have seen plasma weapons do less damage than this," he said quietly. Dr. Kethen was scanning the area with a simple handheld device that still worked. "The electromagnetic readings are back to normal. Whatever caused the storm has gone quiet again." "For now," Jinho said. According to the old reports, these storms happen every few weeks. The planet has been doing this for thousands of years. Engineer Kixtel sat heavily on a chunk of melted metal that had once been one of his floating pods. Why did no one know about this? How could the planetary surveys miss something so dangerous? Captain Park, the supply ship pilot, was examining the wreckage of their crashed vessel in the distance. Because the storms destroy the evidence, any research equipment left on the surface gets wiped clean. The only way to know about the storms is to live through one, or to read the reports of people who lived through them, Jinho added. But those reports were classified because they made this planet look too dangerous for research missions. Tai Min was understanding the bigger picture. So the Galactic Council kept sending research teams here without warning them about the real dangers. The storms are not supposed to happen this often, Sujin said, checking her surviving instruments. According to my readings, the planet's core activity has increased dramatically in the last few years. These electromagnetic pulses are getting stronger and more frequent. Dr. Kethan looked at his dead equipment with new understanding. That is why our technology failed so completely. We designed it for normal electromagnetic interference, not for pulses this powerful. But Jinho's shelter was designed for exactly this kind of interference, Captain Veltar realized. You knew this would happen. I knew it might happen. So I built for the worst-case scenario. Engineer Kixtel stood up and walked around the dome again. Every choice you made, the materials, the shape, the systems inside, everything was specifically designed to handle electromagnetic storms, and to work without any advanced technology at all, Dongwook added. That is the difference, Jinho said. Your technology was designed to be perfect under normal conditions. Mine was designed to work under any conditions. Yewan Nam, the communications officer, was trying to repair her equipment. I cannot get any signal out. The electromagnetic interference may be gone, but all our transmission equipment is fried. How will we contact the rescue ship in 4 months? Captain Park asked. Jinho smiled. The same way humans have been sending signals for thousands of years. He pointed to a pile of materials he had salvaged from the wrecked shelters. We build a bigger antenna out of simple materials that cannot be destroyed by electromagnetic pulses. Over the next few days, the survivors worked together to build a new base around Jinho's dome. But this time, they built it differently. Captain Veltar designed new shelters using Jinho's principles. Instead of trying to overpower the environment with force fields and atmospheric processors, he created buildings that worked with the planet's natural forces, simple stone construction that could not be damaged by electromagnetic pulses, natural ventilation that used wind patterns instead of fighting them. On my world, we would call this architecture primitive, he said as they placed stones for the foundation of a new building. But primitive means first, not simple. These are the first principles of construction, the ones that work everywhere, always. Dr. Kethan was learning to build instruments that did not depend on quantum processors or computer systems. Chemical analysis, mechanical measurements, optical observations, these methods are thousands of years old, but they still work. They work because they use physics directly, Jinho explained. A lever does not care about electromagnetic interference. Chemistry happens the same way regardless of what electronic equipment is nearby. Engineer Kixtel was the most changed by the experience. The engineer who had once mocked Jinho's mud hut was now his most eager student. Teach me to build like this, he asked. My people have forgotten these skills. We can make things float without touching them, but we cannot make things that last when the power fails. What changed your mind? Sujin asked him. Engineer Kixtel looked at the dome that had saved their lives. I spent 20 years learning to make complicated solutions to simple problems. Jinho spent 20 years learning to make simple solutions to complicated problems. His way works better. As they built the new base, they discovered that Jinho's approach created unexpected benefits. Buildings that could survive electromagnetic storms were also better at surviving other disasters. Systems that worked without power were more reliable, even when power was available. Construction methods that used local materials were cheaper and faster than importing everything from off-world. This is not just about building shelters, Dr. Keithan realized. This is a completely different philosophy of engineering. What do you mean? Taman asked. Most galactic civilizations build technology to control their environment. Humans build technology to adapt to their environment. When the environment changes unexpectedly, adaptation works better than control. Captain Park was working on the new communication system. This antenna array is made from salvaged metal and stone supports, but it will be more powerful than what we had on the ship. And it cannot be destroyed by electromagnetic pulses because it has no sensitive electronics. How does it work? Captain Veltar asked. Basic radio principles. We modulate the signal mechanically and amplify it using natural resonance in the antenna structure. It is the same technology humans used to communicate across their home planet centuries ago. But it works? Hyewan Nam smiled as she tested the system. I am picking up signals from the orbital relay station. They can hear us clearly. The rescue came 2 weeks later, not 4 months. The signal from Jinho's simple antenna had reached not just the orbital station, but several passing ships. When the Galactic Council learned that a research team had survived a major electromagnetic storm on Kara 7, they sent an immediate rescue mission. But when the rescue ship arrived, half the team did not want to leave. We are learning things here that we cannot learn anywhere else, Dr. Keithan said. This planet is a natural laboratory for studying adaptive engineering. And the storms are becoming more frequent, Sujin added. If we can understand them better, we can warn other research teams. Captain Veltar had a different reason for wanting to stay. My people need to learn these building techniques. We have become too dependent on technology that fails when conditions change. Engineer Kixtel was already designing a new research station based on Jinho's principles. Imagine what we could build if we combined human adaptive methods with alien material science. We could create structures that survive anything. In the end, most of the team stayed to continue their research, but they stayed in a base built to handle whatever Kara 7 could throw at them. The final report they sent to the Galactic Council was written jointly by all the survivors. It recommended that Jinho's building methods be studied and adopted throughout the galaxy. It suggested that human engineering principles should be included in all planetary research protocols, and it proposed that the old classification system that rated technology by complexity should be changed to rate it by reliability. Advanced technology is not technology that does more, the report concluded. Advanced technology is technology that works when everything else fails. 6 months later, Jinho received a message from the Galactic Engineering Council. They were inviting him to teach a new course, Adaptive Engineering for Hostile Environments. Students would come from hundreds of worlds to learn the human approach to building things that last.